Rain smeared the conference room windows as Caleb Rowan clicked to the final slide of my presentation. My presentation. The one I had stayed up 6 nights perfecting, researching every detail, testing every message. He stood at the head of the table with that smirk that always made my stomach twist into painful knots. "And that," he said, gesturing dramatically at the screen, "is how we redefine brand voice in a saturated market." The room erupted in applause. My boss's boss nodded approval. The client relations team exchanged impressed glances. My name appeared nowhere on those slides. Not once. I sat frozen in my chair, hands gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile and clapped along with everyone else, though each clap felt like a betrayal of myself. But inside, something cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice before it shatters completely into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations that should have been mine. Everyone filed out, still buzzing about Caleb's brilliant strategy. I waited until the room emptied, then approached his chair where he sat checking messages. "Caleb," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. "That was my campaign." He didn't look up from his phone. His fingers kept scrolling, completely unbothered by my presence or my words. "Your input was valuable," he said, still not meeting my eyes as if I didn't deserve even that basic respect. "But strategic direction? That's above your lane, Mia." He finally glanced at me, and that smirk returned like a knife twisting. "You're junior level. Learn to stay in your lane." The words hit like a slap across my face. I stood there for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. My throat tightened. My eyes burned with tears I refused to shed. But I refused to let him see me cry or crumble. I turned and walked out, biting my lip so hard I tasted blood on my tongue. I locked myself in the bathroom on the 3rd floor, the one nobody used because the lights flickered constantly and cast strange shadows. My reflection stared back at me in the spotted mirror. Mascara smudged under my eyes. Hands trembling like leaves in wind. I looked small. Defeated. Invisible. Like I didn't matter at all in the grand scheme of corporate hierarchy. I pressed my palms flat against the cold counter and took 3 deep breaths, forcing oxygen into my constricted lungs. Then I whispered the words I had been too scared to say out loud. "He has no idea who he's talking to." My voice didn't shake this time. My hand steadied against the porcelain. The fear that had paralyzed me moments ago transformed into something sharper, colder, more dangerous than anything I had felt before. Clarity. For the first time since I had started working under Caleb Rowan, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, when focused properly and channeled strategically, builds empires. Or destroys them completely and without mercy. My name is Mia Reynolds. I'm 28 years old, and I've been a brand strategist at Horizon Marketing Group for 18 months of increasingly frustrating work. Before this job, before the corporate ladder and office politics, I ran my own business that actually mattered to me. It started as a side project during college when I had more passion than experience. A small online shop that I grew through late nights, careful research, and creative campaigns that nobody taught me how to build or execute. Within 3 years, that little project generated 7 figures in revenue and caught the attention of major investors. I sold it when I was 26. Not because I needed money desperately, but because I wanted to learn from the best in the industry. I wanted the corporate experience. The mentorship. The structure and guidance from seasoned professionals. What I got instead was Caleb Rowan. A man who thought titles meant talent, who confused authority with intelligence and position with competence. The irony? The company that bought my business was owned by the same parent corporation that owned Horizon Marketing Group where I now worked. 6 months ago, our parent company announced a major acquisition that sent ripples through every department in the building. A digital brand that had exploded in growth over 3 years, using innovative social strategies and customer-focused messaging that industry experts couldn't replicate. Caleb had bragged about it for weeks after the announcement. In every meeting, every presentation, every casual conversation by the coffee machine, he called it a brilliant move by upper management with incredible foresight. He analyzed their growth model and team workshops with an air of authority. He presented their strategy as a case study for how modern brands should operate. He built his reputation on understanding why it worked so brilliantly when others failed. What Caleb didn't know, what nobody at Horizon knew except the executives who had signed the papers, was that I had designed every single piece of that growth model from scratch. I was the architect he was studying with such fascination. The genius he was trying to imitate without understanding the foundation. And now, he had just stolen my work and told me to stay in my lane. The lane I had built with my own hands. The road he was driving on without permission or acknowledgement. That night, I sat in my apartment with my laptop and a notebook, surrounded by the quiet hum of determination. I didn't cry. I didn't call friends to vent about workplace injustice. I planned with the precision of a military strategist. First, I created a folder on my personal drive with layers of encryption. Then I started pulling every file, every email, every draft I had ever worked on at Horizon from various backup systems. Timestamps. Version histories. Original documents with my name in the metadata that couldn't be erased or disputed. I had been meticulous about saving my work, but now I organized it differently with a new purpose in mind. Now it was evidence that could stand up in any courtroom or boardroom. I documented every conversation with Caleb where he had taken credit for my ideas without hesitation. Every meeting where he had presented my research as his own brilliant thinking. Every email where he had revised my work by simply adding his name to the author line. The pattern was undeniable. Systematic. Deliberate. Calculated theft of intellectual property and credit. By 2 a.m, I had built a case that would end his career permanently. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. Revenge served cold tastes better and cuts deeper. The following week, Caleb started pushing me aside with increasing aggression and obvious intent to marginalize my contributions completely. He assigned my ongoing projects to other team members, telling them I needed to focus on smaller, manageable tasks more appropriate for my experience level. He stopped inviting me to client meetings where decisions were made. He removed my name from the team distribution list for strategic planning sessions that I had once led. He was trying to make me irrelevant. To push me out quietly so he could continue stealing my work without interference or witnesses who might question the origin. Anyone watching would have thought I was failing. Being demoted. Losing ground in the competitive corporate environment. But I smiled through every reassignment with grace. I thanked him for the guidance with false sincerity. I agreed to every demotion without protest or visible frustration. Because while Caleb was busy sidelining me and celebrating his apparent victory, I was busy building alliances with people who actually mattered. I started having lunch with people from the data analytics team who controlled the numbers. I helped the design lead with research for her project without asking for credit. And I scheduled coffee with Laura Dean, our HR director, to discuss career development and other important matters that required discretion. Laura Dean was 52, sharp as broken glass, and famous for her ability to spot corporate problems before they exploded into company-destroying scandals. She had worked in human resources for 30 years and had seen every type of workplace drama imaginable, from embezzlement to harassment to fraud. When I asked to meet with her about mentorship and growth opportunities, she agreed immediately without asking too many preliminary questions. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office where no colleagues would accidentally overhear our conversation. I love working at Horizon, I told her, stirring my latte slowly while choosing my words carefully. But I feel like I'm not growing under my current director. Laura raised an eyebrow with interest. Caleb Rowan? I nodded. Can you give me an example of what you mean? I pulled out my tablet and showed her 3 campaigns with all the documentation. The original drafts with my name and timestamp clearly visible in the file properties. The final presentations with only Caleb's name prominently displayed at the top. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes that told me she understood exactly what I was showing her. "Thank you for sharing this with me, Mia," she said carefully, her voice measured and professional. "I think we should talk more about this situation soon." She didn't make promises or accusations. But I knew I had just planted a seed that would grow into something powerful and unstoppable. 2 weeks later, Caleb called me into his office with an expression that made my skin crawl with unease. He was smiling, which was never a good sign in my experience with him. "Mia," he said, leaning back in his leather chair like a king on a throne. "I've been thinking about your development and your future here at the company." He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. "You've got potential, but you need guidance from someone with real experience." He smiled wider, clearly pleased with himself. "I'd like to set up weekly mentorship sessions. Just you and me. I'll teach you how real strategy works in the corporate world." I could barely contain my reaction to this unexpected gift. He actually thought he was doing me a favor by offering his precious time. "That sounds amazing," I said, matching his enthusiasm perfectly with practiced sincerity. "Thank you so much, Caleb. I really want to learn from you and understand your process better." We scheduled the first session for Thursday afternoon in his private office. I walked out of his office, and the moment the door closed behind me with a soft click, I allowed myself the smallest smile of triumph. He had just given me exactly what I needed without realizing the trap he was setting for himself: documented, one-on-one meetings where he would explain his strategic thinking without any filter or caution. Thinking that was actually mine from the beginning. Every word would be evidence that I could use when the perfect moment arrived. For the next month, I attended Caleb's mentorship sessions like a devoted student eager to absorb every piece of wisdom he offered. I took notes in a leather journal. I asked questions that encouraged him to talk more. I recorded every meeting through the company's official documentation system, which was completely legal and required for compliance purposes under corporate policy. In those sessions, Caleb revealed more than he intended to someone he viewed as harmless and easily controlled. He showed me how he positioned himself for promotions through political maneuvering. How he took credit for team successes while distancing himself from any failures. How he framed others' failures as learning opportunities he had predicted and warned against unsuccessfully. He even explained how he decided which team members' ideas to claim as his own with shocking honesty. "You look for the ones who won't fight back," he told me during our fourth session without any shame or self-awareness. "The ones who are too scared to make waves or challenge authority figures like me." He was teaching me his playbook with pride. Writing his own confession in permanent ink. And I was documenting every word of it with timestamps and official company records that created an unshakable paper trail of his arrogance and systematic theft of others' work. Then the campaign launched with fanfare and high expectations from everyone involved. My campaign, wearing Caleb's name like stolen clothes. The one he had presented to the executive team with such confidence. The one everyone had praised as innovative and brilliant. It went live on a Tuesday morning across 7 platforms simultaneously. Within 48 hours, the client was calling with concerns about messaging inconsistencies. By Thursday, 3 major stakeholders had pulled their support citing brand alignment issues. By Friday afternoon, the campaign had lost 30% of its projected budget, and the client was threatening to terminate the contract entirely. The executive team called an emergency meeting with grim faces. Caleb sat at the conference table, face pale, jaw clenched tightly. The CEO, Vincent Blake, pulled up the campaign metrics on the screen with disappointment evident in his expression. "What happened here, Caleb?" Vincent asked in a tone that demanded answers. The room fell silent with anticipation. Everyone waited for an explanation that would make sense of the disaster. Caleb cleared his throat nervously. Then he turned and looked directly at me with calculated malice. "The execution wasn't aligned with the strategy," he said without hesitation or remorse. "That's on the implementation team who didn't follow my clear instructions." Vincent frowned with confusion. Who handled implementation of this campaign? Caleb didn't hesitate even for a moment. Mia Reynolds oversaw the rollout. I trusted her with that responsibility, but clearly she wasn't ready for it despite my guidance. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying expressions of sympathy and judgment. My face burned with humiliation. My hands clenched under the table so hard my nails cut into my palms. But I kept my voice calm and measured. Actually, I said slowly, looking directly at Vincent, I wasn't involved in the implementation at all. I was reassigned to administrative tasks 3 weeks before launch by Caleb himself. Caleb's expression hardened into something ugly. That's not how I remember it, and I have documentation to prove my version. Vincent looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension in the room. We'll review the project timeline later and get to the bottom of this. For now, Caleb, I need solutions, not blame or excuses. The meeting continued with tense discussion, but I stopped listening to the words being spoken. Because Caleb had just made his fatal mistake without realizing the trap closing around him. He had publicly blamed me, on record, in front of executives with witnesses. He had lied in a documented meeting that would be reviewed and analyzed. And I had evidence that proved every word was false and calculated. The trap was closing with perfect precision and timing. That night, I stayed late at the office while the building emptied of workers heading home. Not because I was upset about the meeting, but because I had work to do that required concentration. Real work that would change everything. For the past month, I had been quietly developing something new in the hours after everyone left. Something bigger than campaigns or presentations or office politics. I called it Project Atlas after the company I had built and sold. It was a comprehensive growth model based on the exact strategies I had used to build my previous brand with proven results. The one our parent company had acquired for millions of dollars. The one Caleb had been trying to replicate without understanding its foundation or the psychology behind each decision. I refined every section with meticulous attention to detail, polished every framework until it shone with clarity, and backed it up with data from my original company's success metrics that were undeniable and impressive. Project Atlas was everything Caleb pretended to be but never was: innovative, tested, and proven in the real market. When I finished at 2 a.m. with burning eyes, I saved it to the company's shared strategy drive where executives could access it. Then I sent a notification to Vincent Blake's executive assistant, requesting time on his calendar to present a new growth initiative that could transform the company's entire approach to brand development. The following week, Caleb called me into his office again with an exhausted expression that almost made me feel sorry for him. This time, he wasn't smiling or posturing. He looked exhausted. Stressed. The campaign failure was damaging his reputation, and the executive team was demanding answers he couldn't provide convincingly. "Look, Mia," he said, rubbing his temples as if fighting a headache. "We both know you didn't have the experience to handle that campaign properly. It was too advanced for your skill level and understanding of complex market dynamics." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret meant only for me. "Next time, let the senior strategists lead the projects. That's how you learn in this business. By watching, not by trying to do it yourself before you're ready." I nodded slowly, as if considering his wisdom with genuine reflection and acceptance. "You're right," I said, keeping my tone humble and agreeable. "I should stay in my lane and not overstep my position." His shoulders relaxed with visible relief. "Exactly. I'm glad you understand how things work here now." I stood to leave, then paused at the door as if remembering something important. "Caleb, just one question. When you say let the senior strategists lead, do you mean you? Since you built the campaign from the ground up?" He smiled with pride and without any hesitation. "Of course. That's my job as director, and I take it seriously." I nodded again with false understanding. "Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that detail." I had recorded that entire conversation with crystal clarity. Every word and every admission of ownership. Laura Dean called me 2 days later at an unexpected hour. Not to my work extension where others might overhear, but to my personal cell phone in the evening. Mia, she said quietly with urgency in her tone, can we meet off campus? There's a situation I need to discuss with you that requires complete privacy. We met at the same coffee shop where we had talked before. This time, Laura didn't waste time with pleasantries or small talk about the weather. I've been conducting a discreet review, she said, pulling out her tablet with organized files already open. Based on our previous conversation and some concerning patterns I noticed, I started looking into project attribution patterns in Caleb's department over the past several years. She showed me a spreadsheet with meticulous detail. Dozens of projects over the past 2 years displayed in neat columns. All marked as led by Caleb Rowan in the official company records. But the original files, the ones with metadata timestamps that couldn't be altered without leaving traces, told a different story entirely. This isn't just about you, Mia, Laura continued with professional concern in her voice. This is systematic corporate theft. But I need ironclad evidence to move forward with formal action. Can you provide documentation that will stand up to legal scrutiny? I opened my bag and handed her a USB drive that contained months of careful preparation. Everything is on there. Timestamped files, emails, meeting recordings, project drafts, version histories. All legally obtained following company policy to the letter. Laura looked at the drive with appreciation, then back at me with new respect. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? I've been protecting myself and documenting the truth, I corrected with quiet determination. She smiled with genuine admiration. You just handed me gold that will change everything in this company. 2 weeks passed with deceptive normalcy that masked the storm building beneath the surface. On the surface, everything seemed normal to casual observers walking the halls. Caleb strutted through the office, already recovered from the campaign failure with his usual arrogance intact. He had successfully blamed it on implementation issues and moved on to his next project without consequences. He even started telling people he was being considered for a vice president position with increased responsibilities. The executive team was supposedly impressed with his strategic vision and clarity. His leadership during crisis situations. His ability to guide junior team members through their mistakes with patience and wisdom. Meanwhile, I continued working on small administrative tasks that anyone could have done. Organizing files in alphabetical order. Scheduling meetings for other people. Taking notes in strategy sessions where Caleb presented ideas that other team members had developed without their knowledge. To everyone watching without deeper understanding, I looked defeated. Sidelined. Irrelevant. A cautionary tale about overreaching. But beneath the surface where corporate investigations happen in quiet conference rooms, Laura's investigation was building momentum like an avalanche preparing to fall. HR was pulling files from archived systems. Reviewing contracts with legal teams. Interviewing team members confidentially about their experiences. And I was putting the final touches on Project Atlas with perfectionist attention to detail, waiting for the perfect moment to strike with devastating precision and undeniable proof. That moment came during Vincent Blake's announcement of a major board review that would reshape the company's leadership structure entirely. The company was restructuring its leadership team in response to market pressures, and several director-level positions were being evaluated for promotion to vice president roles with significant salary increases. Caleb's name was first on the list of candidates being considered. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks away with high stakes. All candidates would present their strategic vision for the company's future growth in front of board members who would determine their futures. 2 days before the meeting, I sent Caleb an email carefully worded to appeal to his ego. Hi Caleb, I wrote with calculated friendliness, I've been working on a strategic concept that might interest you for your board presentation. It's based on our parent company's acquisition strategy and recent market trends. Would you like to preview the deck before your board presentation? Maybe there's something useful you could incorporate to strengthen your pitch and impress the decision makers. He responded within minutes with predictable enthusiasm. Great initiative, Mia. This is the kind of proactive thinking I've been trying to teach you. Send it over right away. I'll take a look and see what we can use to make my presentation even stronger. I attached a file called Growth Strategy Preview that I had prepared specifically for this moment and hit send with satisfaction. Then I leaned back in my chair and waited with the patience of someone who knew exactly what would happen next. The bait was set perfectly. The trap was ready to spring at exactly the right moment. The file I sent Caleb was clever in its construction and designed to expose his lack of true understanding. It contained real insights that demonstrated genuine market knowledge, genuine strategic frameworks that had proven successful in various industries, and impressive market analysis that would impress anyone who read it superficially. But buried in the third section was a deliberately incomplete growth model that looked sophisticated at first glance. Numbers that looked impressive on the surface but didn't quite add up under scrutiny. Conclusions that seemed logical initially but lacked proper data support when examined carefully by experts. A framework that worked only if you understood the underlying methodology I had developed for my original brand through years of testing and refinement. If you didn't understand that foundation or the psychological principles driving consumer behavior, the model would collapse under scrutiny like a house of cards. Caleb, predictable as sunrise and blinded by his own arrogance, took the entire presentation and claimed it as his own without verification. He didn't dig deeper into the methodology. Didn't verify the data against market realities. Didn't question the incomplete sections that a real strategist would have caught immediately. He saw an impressive deck that could boost his reputation, recognized that it could elevate his board presentation and secure his promotion, and copied it wholesale without understanding what he was actually presenting. 3 days later, he walked into the boardroom with my incomplete strategy clutched in his hands, ready to claim another victory for his growing collection. And I walked in right behind him with quiet confidence, carrying the complete version of Project Atlas that would expose every lie he had ever told about his capabilities. The board meeting started with standard presentations that followed the usual corporate format and predictable structure. 3 other directors went first, each pitching their vision for growth with varying degrees of success and originality. Then Caleb stood with his characteristic confidence that bordered on arrogance. He commanded the room with practiced charisma, clicking through the slides I had created specifically to expose his incompetence. For the first 10 minutes, the board members nodded along with polite attention. Then he reached the incomplete section without realizing the danger. The growth model with gaps that would be obvious to anyone who understood the subject deeply. Vincent Blake leaned forward with growing confusion on his face. Caleb, this framework seems inconsistent with our Atlas acquisition data that we reviewed last quarter. The conversion metrics don't align with the documented results we purchased the company for. Caleb hesitated, his confidence flickering visibly. Well, this is a modified approach based on similar principles that I've been developing through extensive research. Another board member spoke up with skepticism in her voice. But you're claiming 30% growth efficiency in this projection. The Atlas model achieved 52% with documented proof. Why is there such a significant gap between your numbers and the proven results? Caleb stumbled through an explanation that made no sense to anyone with basic business knowledge. His confidence evaporated like water on hot concrete. The board members exchanged concerned glances that spoke volumes about their doubts. Then Laura Dean, sitting at the far end of the table with her organized folders, spoke clearly and deliberately with perfect timing. Perhaps we should ask who actually built this model and created the original methodology we're discussing today. All eyes turned to Laura with sudden intense focus and confusion about where this was heading. Vincent looked confused and slightly annoyed. What do you mean by that question, Laura? Laura opened her folder with deliberate calm that commanded attention, pulling out documents she had organized with meticulous care. I mean that the framework Caleb just presented is based on the Atlas acquisition model that our company purchased 2 years ago. A model that was developed by Mia Reynolds 2 years before we acquired the company for several $1 million. The room fell completely silent with shock. You could have heard paper rustling or someone breathing heavily. Caleb's face drained of color until he looked almost gray. That's not accurate, he said weakly, his voice losing all its earlier confidence. I developed this framework through months of research. Laura pulled out documentation with authoritative precision that left no room for doubt or argument. Original business registration papers with official stamps. Growth reports with verified data from independent auditors. Financial statements with certified signatures. All bearing my name as founder and sole proprietor. Mia Reynolds founded and built Atlas Strategies before selling it to our parent company for a significant acquisition price, Laura explained to the stunned board. The proprietary growth system Caleb has been studying for months and presenting as his own expertise? She designed every component from scratch through years of testing and market research. She looked directly at me with respect. Mia, would you like to present the complete model and explain the actual methodology to the board? I stood with steady confidence, pulled out my tablet without any nervousness, and connected to the screen with practiced ease. I'd be happy to show you what real strategic thinking looks like. And just like that, the truth hit the boardroom like an earthquake that would reshape everything. The foundation of lies crumbled. The house of cards collapsed completely and irreversibly. I presented Project Atlas in its complete form with the confidence of someone who had created something genuine and tested. Every gap Caleb's version contained, I filled with accurate data. Every question the board had asked, I answered with detailed explanations backed by evidence. I showed them the original data from my company with financial records they could verify. The methodology I had developed through years of trial and error and market testing. The proven results that had made Atlas Strategies valuable enough to acquire for millions of dollars. Then Laura handed over the rest of her evidence with organized efficiency that demonstrated thorough investigation. Emails where Caleb had claimed my work as his own without hesitation or credit. Recordings from our mentorship sessions where he explained how he took credit for others' ideas as standard practice. Testimonials from team members who had experienced the same pattern of theft over the years. Project files with metadata proving I had created campaigns he presented as his own groundbreaking work. The board reviewed everything in silence that felt heavy with implications and consequences. Vincent's expression shifted from confusion to anger as he read document after document. Caleb tried to speak in his own defense. This is taken out of context by people who don't understand. I was managing these projects and providing guidance. Vincent cut him off sharply with barely controlled fury in his voice. You didn't manage them, Caleb. You stole them and claimed credit for years. And you've been doing it systematically for 2 years to multiple employees. He closed the folder with finality. Effective immediately, you're terminated for gross misconduct and intellectual property theft. Security arrived within minutes of the termination announcement, having been called in advance by HR protocols. Caleb had to surrender his laptop, his keycard, his company phone with all its contacts and information. He stood in the boardroom, pale and shaking like someone in shock, while they collected his access credentials with professional efficiency. He looked at me once with an expression I couldn't quite read. Just once with something that might have been hatred or fear. You planned this entire thing, he said, voice hollow and defeated like all the air had been knocked out of him. I met his eyes without flinching or showing any satisfaction. No, Caleb. I built my career on hard work and genuine strategy and real innovation. You built yours on theft and lies and taking credit for others' efforts. I just documented the truth that was always there. He opened his mouth to respond, but Vincent spoke first with authority that ended the discussion. You're done here, Caleb. Security will escort you out immediately. Clean out your desk under supervision. As they led him toward the door with a security guard on each side, he turned back one final time with desperation. You destroyed me and everything I built here. I gathered my presentation notes, keeping my voice level and professional without any triumph in my tone. No. You destroyed yourself through your own actions and choices. I just stopped holding up the walls of lies you built your career on. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like finality. The room remained silent for 3 long seconds while everyone processed what had just happened. Then Vincent turned to me with new respect. Mia, please stay. We need to talk about your future here at this company. The conversation that followed changed everything about my career and my future in ways I hadn't even imagined possible. Vincent asked me to explain Project Atlas in detail without the time constraints of a board presentation. I walked the board through every component with enthusiasm and detailed knowledge that demonstrated true expertise. How I had built brand loyalty through authentic engagement rather than empty marketing promises. How I had achieved growth without massive advertising budgets that most companies relied on. How the model could scale across multiple markets and industries with modifications for different sectors. The board members asked questions for over an hour with genuine interest and engagement. By the end, Vincent was smiling with satisfaction and obvious approval of what he was hearing. "Mia, you've demonstrated something rare in this industry that we value highly," he said thoughtfully. "Not just talent and intelligence, but integrity and patience. You could have caused a public scandal that damaged the company. Instead, you followed proper channels and documented everything professionally according to corporate policy." He paused, glancing at the other board members who were nodding in agreement with his assessment. They nodded in agreement with conviction. "We'd like to offer you the role of Creative Strategy Director immediately. You'll oversee all brand development across our divisions, with full authority to build your own team of talented people who share your values." I thought about Caleb's words that had started this entire journey. "Stay in your lane like a good little employee." I smiled with satisfaction. "I accept without hesitation. But I'll need a wider road to build on and the resources to make real change happen." The next 6 months transformed Horizon Marketing Group into something completely different from what it had been under Caleb's corrupted leadership. I built a team of strategists who actually understood creative thinking and genuine innovation rather than theft. We implemented Project Atlas across 8 client accounts with careful attention to each company's unique needs. Every single one exceeded growth projections by significant margins that impressed even skeptical board members. The campaigns I developed personally won 3 major industry awards that brought positive attention to the company. The parent company's executive team invited me to present at their quarterly leadership summit to share our success. Media outlets interviewed me about innovative brand strategy and the future of authentic marketing. My team grew from 6 people to 20 talented individuals who shared my vision. We moved to a larger office space with glass walls and natural light that energized everyone. And every single day without fail, I remembered the conference room where Caleb had clicked through my stolen presentation with such arrogance. The moment he told me to stay in my lane with that condescending smirk. The moment my career almost ended before it truly began because of one man's ego. But I had built the road he tried to drive on without permission or understanding. And when he fell off because of his own carelessness and arrogance, I kept building something bigger and better. The road stretched ahead with endless possibilities and opportunities one had created through patience and documentation. One afternoon 6 months after the board meeting that had changed everything, I received an email from an unfamiliar address that caught my attention. The subject line read simply, "I was wrong about you," without any additional context. I almost deleted it without opening, assuming it was spam or phishing. Then curiosity got the better of me and I clicked. The message was short and surprisingly humble. 3 sentences from Caleb Rowan, sent from a personal email account he must have created after his termination. "I underestimated you completely. I treated you terribly and stole your work. I hope you found the success you deserved all along." I stared at the screen for a long moment with mixed emotions I couldn't quite name. Part of me wanted to reply with everything I had held back. To tell him exactly how his actions had affected me and damaged my confidence. How close he had come to destroying my confidence and career permanently. But I realized something important about closure and moving forward. He didn't deserve my anger anymore or any of my emotional energy. He didn't deserve my time or attention or forgiveness. I closed the email without responding and went back to work that actually mattered. That evening, I stood on stage at our company's annual summit with spotlights bright. 200 employees filled the auditorium with excited energy. I presented Project Atlas to thunderous applause that echoed through the hall. And when the applause finally quieted down to attentive silence, I spoke the words I had been saving for this moment. When someone tells you to stay in your lane, I said, pausing to let the room settle into complete silence, remind them who built the road they're driving on without permission. The room erupted again. For the first time, I felt truly seen for who I was and what I had accomplished through patience and integrity.